Thank
Like
you.
I was saying, I also want to thank Spring Rain Global and of course Dr. Glenda Antonio for extending the invitation for me to be here today. I'd like to wish everyone a good day. It's afternoon over here. I'm in the Philippines. I'm not sure where you are, but yeah, I wish you a good day. Today I'll be talking about digital transformation in philanthropy. And I want to start it by just getting a feel for everyone here in this room, whether you're a speaker or you're a participant in this conference. Can you maybe type it in the chat? Let me know. Are you part of a nonprofit? Are you part of a religious organization? Are you part of a social enterprise or perhaps a donor and so on? And aside from that, can you let me know what comes to your mind when you hear the word digital transformation? Like, what does it mean for you in your context? Because when I was preparing for this, I was thinking, you can approach digital transformation in a couple of ways. Well, two primary ways, I suppose. One from the nonprofit side, from the organizational side, and of course, one from the donor side on how to connect. As Mr. Kunal Verma was saying, how they connect to different communities to do philanthropic actions. So you can think about that right now, and you can hold on to your answer, and I'll ask you to type it in the chat, or you can type it in the chat as I'm speaking. But I also want to start now with a little bit of a disclaimer. So I'm the executive director of Make Sense here in the Philippines, and I'm not an IT specialist. I'm not a technology specialist. I'm talking about digital transformation in philanthropy from the perspective of an executive director of a nonprofit organization. So with that said, I also want to give a bit more context on who Make Sense is. Let me share my screen right now. Do let me know, Anne-Marie, or any of the tech staff if you're able to see my screen. Okay, it seems like you can see my screen. So yeah, I'll give you a little bit of a briefer also now in Make Sense, so you can also understand what angle am I taking this from. Hopefully it'll be something that's relevant to all of you. As I said, I'm coming from the executive director position of a nonprofit, and this is how I'm going to approach digital philanthropy. Digital transformation. Now, basically, I'm just going to talk about three primary things in this talk. Number one, what is digital transformation? So it might be something different it might mean something different because we all work on different advocacies, different areas, and we have different team dynamics and so on. So I want to break it down a little bit to make sure that that we're all kind of having different specific takeaways for each of our own organizations. The second one is I'm going to tell you stories, or rather one big story of how we dealt with digital transformation amidst this pandemic. And I'm sure all of you can relate how this pandemic has forced everyone, or even for-profit organizations, every sector basically, to really take up digital transformation. And I'm just going to have a final word on how to get things started. Nothing technical, just things from my point of view in trying to do this transformation with our own organization. So Make Sense is a global organization. We started in 2010 in Paris, and we support innovation at every scale to help citizens, organizations address the ever-changing social and environmental challenges of the 21st century. We have offices all over the world. In the Philippines, it acts as a hub for operations in the whole of Asia, but we also operate in Latin America, in West Africa, in Lebanon, Paris, and so on. In the Philippines, we've been here since 2015, and we work in around 9 cities around the Philippines in the 3 different regions from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. And Make Sense basically acts as a bridge, as a catalyst for people to be able to create the social and environmental impact that they want to create. So we do realize that there are a lot of gaps for people to be able to kind of create the social and environmental change. So for example, there can be gaps of knowledge. So we have a lot of people who are very big advocates of, let's say, to eliminate plastic waste, or perhaps for public health care, and they want to start a social enterprise, but they don't exactly have the business acumen. They don't know the methodologies. They don't know how to develop a sustainable movement or a sustainable initiative to act on this advocacy. So we support them in forming that and bridging that gap. Sometimes it's a gap of network. Perhaps they have one skill and they need someone else with another skill to complement them and to be able to kind of carry out their initiative effectively. And sometimes it's physical resources, right? Maybe they don't have a space, maybe they don't have an internet connection to be able to work on their projects. So Make Sense looks to solve all of these, bridge all of these gaps, and act as a catalyst for anyone in society to be able to create this change and really lower the barrier to entry for creating social impact. And when we talk about every actor in society, we typically mean three actors. One is citizens. So this is everyone. We help people create social movements, create solutions to these social movements, and connect with people who are like-minded, who believe in the same thing, and to create these new narratives. We work with social entrepreneurs. So we have an in-house incubator where we work with idea stage social enterprises to help them develop innovative and impactful solutions and disruptive solutions in their industry. And we also work with hundreds of institutions and companies to help them form their CSR programs and their philanthropic initiatives to be able to work towards systemic change. In the same way that Mr. Kunal Verma in the last 40 minutes was telling you about how Tata does this, we support companies also in being able to roll this out. And the great thing about Make Sense is that we don't address these audiences or these people in a silo. We address everyone together in every solution that we do. So our ecosystem of impact is, we believe, with citizens, when they're connecting to each other, they're learning, they're creating movements, and they're sharing it with other people and growing actions in mass mobilization. We They collaborate with entrepreneurs who are designing and launching these innovative and disruptive solutions and trying to scale them up to make them more of the status quo in whatever we do. And we work with organizations to inspire people with their huge reach, their huge resources, to engage people and really transform how they work in their industry. When we have all of these working together, we believe that we can create a really, really strong positive impact through collaborating. And that is really what Make Sense looks to do. And if you don't remember any of what I just said in the past, let's say 3 to 5 minutes, just remember this: Make Sense looks to help people bridge the gap between where they are currently and the kind of social and environmental impact that they want to have, and be a catalyst for this kind of change for a more inclusive and sustainable society. Okay, so that is Make Sense. That is me, and that's the point of view that I'm coming from. Now, I'm going to talk about what is digital transformation and why does this matter for nonprofits. So sorry, let me go back and let me look at the chat again. And I did ask you at the very start to tell me or type it in the chat what kind of organization you are and what comes to your mind. Like, what's the first thought that comes to your mind when we talk about digital transformation? It can just be like a couple of words. It could be one sentence. So I'll give a few seconds for that. I'll have a sip of water and I'll look at the chat right now, and I just want to have a feel of the point of view of everyone in this conference right now. All right, so we have already 2 people saying they're from nonprofits, one from interfaith, one from higher educational institution. So I'm going to assume that most of you are from nonprofits, which is I think good given the positioning for this. Oh, foundation, yeah. Okay, then it should be right up your alley. Documents available online. And someone put here in the chat, making documents available online and easily shared across stakeholders. Yes, that is a part of digital transformation. And we'll dive into that in more detail later. But basically, when we talk about digital transformation, it's really simple. It's just the integration of digital technology in how your organization operates or delivers value in order to make you more impactful, whether through a bigger scale, bigger reach, more efficiency, and so on. And you can just simply think about it in this Venn diagram over here of people, processes, and technology, where all of these 3 things meet. But now we have to break down, because it's still quite a general definition. Now we have to break it down because it's gonna, like I said before, it's gonna mean something different to you depending on what you're working on, how your organization operates, maybe even the area that you're in. So how do we think about digital transformation in a holistic way for nonprofits, right? We can typically chunk it into 3 things. And if tools transformation at the simplest level, then we talk about operational transformation, and then we talk about impact transformation. So you move left to right, one to the other, but you need all 3 to have a really holistic digital transformation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of them and what exactly we mean by this kind of transformation, right? So let's start with tools transformation. And basically, It just means you're using new platforms, you're using new applications or new delivery models. This mostly affects, so an example of this can be if you switch from manual banking, writing checks every payroll, and you go to digital banking. You're essentially doing the same thing, but you've just switched the platform to digital, right? It involves a little bit of change in terms of the way perhaps your finance, your HR team is doing their work. So it affects certain teammates. And it also affects if you have them in your team right now, your IT staff or your tools manager. But that's the extent of it, right? The main benefit you can have is that let's use the example again of going from manual banking to digital. You're making things more efficient. You're freeing up resources like time, freeing up time that you would have had you lost before waiting in line at the bank to cash in some checks, and just doing it maybe 2 hours every time you have to do payroll, which is significant, right? So this is tools transformation. Again, it's just new platforms, application, or delivery models, and it has a limited scope of effect. And then we move on to to operational transformation. So this is a level up, right? This involves not just new platforms and applications and delivery models. This involves changing the way you work and the way you collaborate with the different members of your team. So this affects the entire team. And a good example of this can be, and I'm sure a lot of you perhaps may have gone through this already, going from 100% in-person working to 100% or even just partial remote working and coordination for the entire team. So not only have you taken on new platforms and applications, but you've also changed the way you work with different people in your team. So this affects, again, your entire team. And the main benefit for this is you can become more efficient with coordinating with the team, because perhaps you're not spending time stuck in traffic. You can spend perhaps more time, more energy, focus on the task you have for the day, and this can increase the ability of your team. And so this is operational transformation. That is like the second level. And if you go to the third level, this is what really is the final piece of the puzzle when we talk about holistic digital transformation. And this is impact transformation. So what changes is the way you engage externally, the way you engage your donors, your board, your beneficiaries, your community, and so on. So this impacts your this affects your impact and your outcomes. Whereas when you're doing tools and operational transformation, it doesn't necessarily change your impact or your outcome in terms of like let's say scalability. So this again affects your entire team, but it affects externally as well, your beneficiaries and donors. And the main benefit for this is that you can increase the scale of your organization's impact. And an example of this is, for example, a lot of organizations started doing for the first time online webinars, online programs, which means that these are events, these are activities where people from anywhere in the world can join you remotely. If you do this, if you have started doing this, you have effectively changed the reach of your organization, right? And interaction, not just like sending information, but interacting. Actually, you've expanded your community. And of course, there's also digital storytelling to spread your organization's mission. If before someone from another country did not know that you had this mission, that you had this kind of impact, if you've taken up digital storytelling, whether in newsletters or emails or social media or online webinars and so on, you've effectively expanded the impact of your organization. So we need all of these three things to be able to get a holistic digital transformation. So I'm going to pause there for a little bit, and I'm going to let you think about what do all of these things mean for your organization, right? Because you may be using different tools right now. You may be using different operations, and there may be different ways in that you're creating impact. So I'll give you a second to think about all of this and really reflect: tools, operational, and impact. Once we have all of these three things in change, we're having a really holistic digital transformation. And we see in the chat over here a comment from Miss Hannah Mora. She said, making documents available online and easily shared across stakeholders. So that is an example of both tools and operational, right? You can work remotely and you're using a new, different digital tool compared to if you were just writing it in, let's say, a notebook or a pad in person. So this is just a again, a basic framework for you to be able to think about digital transformation in your own context. All right. So now that I've talked about this basic breakdown, why does it matter for all of you in this conference to think about this, to even consider digital transformation? So it's become very obvious because to just continue operations despite mass gatherings being impossible to do, and all this social distancing. But there are a lot of other reasons also why digital transformation is super relevant to you right now. Number one is we talked a lot about efficiency, and we all know this. Nonprofits are constantly being asked to do more with less, right? So I think maybe you can relate with me, or you can feel with me when you see perhaps in some of your funding there's quite a restriction. There's quite a, a, a restriction on the amount of unrestricted funding compared to restricted funding, right? Maybe your admin costs are maybe your admin costs don't fit within what the grant or the funding you get is allocates, right? So being efficient really helps. It helps you allocate resources much better and make the most of what available budget that you have to use. So this is one way digital transformation matters to you. The second one is with nonprofits, especially the grassroots one. These often involve teams that are lean, with people wearing multiple hats. Sometimes you're doing communications, and sometimes the same person doing communications is also doing a little bit of program management, right? So this is even the case for us, I would have to say. And having tools and ways of working that can lower the friction in collaborating with other people, and as you switch these roles, because maybe you have so many things to remember, so many things to coordinate. So if you have tools and ways of working that allow you to do this and still retain a high quality of work, then this is something that's also very impactful and relevant for you. The third thing is that it can open opportunities for you to serve stakeholders or take up projects you initially might not have been able to. So for example, over here in the Philippines, if I could only do projects with organizations and communities over here in the Philippines, but suddenly I set up a new way of working, a new digital infrastructure for me to be able to deliver a project, let's say somewhere in Hong Kong or Taiwan, then that opens up an opportunity for me to apply to different sources of funding, to take on different kinds of projects, and increase the capacity of the team. So this opens up, this allows you to diversify or open up more funding opportunities. And the last thing is, of course, it can strengthen your data-driven decision making. So when you use digital tools, they often inherently are easier to track, easier to measure. So this helps you come up with better decisions on how exactly your programs are running, how exactly your actions are taking into effect with different kinds of stakeholders. So because you're able to get more of this data, you're able to come up with better decisions. You're able to improve your impact measurement if you really set it up, and you're able to also, of course, improve your reporting to your funders through this data. So these are all the reasons why digital transformation is going to be something that's relevant for you right now as a nonprofit or as an organization. I'm going to give you some examples of tools and operations, and I'm not going to take too much time on this because I don't want it to be like one big ad for different kinds of softwares, but I do want to give you an idea of what kind of operational transformation and what tools are out there that might be relevant to your organization. Again, I'm not saying that you should be using these tools. These are mostly tools that also we use. You don't have to use them yourself because, of course, your organization runs differently. But I just want to give you an idea so that it's not just a concept, right? I'm not just talking theoretically. So one of the ways you can do digital transformation is through cloud-based storage and collaborative suites. So I'm sure you've perhaps used one of these, maybe Gmail to handle your mail, connected to Google Calendar to organize your day, your meeting, your calls, etc., etc. And maybe Google Documents, where both multiple people can work on the same document in real time. And so if your team is saying that we need to work on this thing, then this might be the relevant transformation to you, right? So these things, well, if they mention things like data and content management, like, oh, we have our, we have our information in different hard drives or something, or different locations. If you have to worry always about remembering to back up, if you're worried about your data security in multiple drives in physical locations, who might be able to take them and access them. If you think that you need to work on real-time access to information or flexible working, then perhaps cloud-based storage and collaborative suites is one of the transformations and tools and operations that you want to take up. Another one is communications tools and CRM, or customer relationship management or donor relationship management tools. Now, this one, I'm sure communications you're very familiar with. I'm sure all of you are using one of these, whether there's Zoom, which we're using right now, or Google Meet or Microsoft Teams. There are work group apps such as Slack or Discord. There are messengers, whether you use WhatsApp, Viber, Signal. If the concern of your team and your stakeholders organizing work groups, a better circulation of information, flexible working, and of course documentation of all of these messages, then perhaps communication tools, messaging tools is something that you want to pick up. And of course, donor relationship management tools. There are things such as HubSpot, Salesforce. LinkedIn is not a CRM, but it's useful for a CRM or donor relationship management. Or you could just use simple spreadsheets software. So if your team is having a hard time perhaps managing the needs of donors, tracking all the people you're talking to, and managing the entire fundraising progress to hit your fundraising targets, then perhaps this is something that you want to pick up. Now, collaboration and project management tools. This is honestly one of my favorite and makes sense. We use so many for so many different purposes, for so many different kinds of processes. So we have stuff on brainstorming. I'm not sure if you've heard of this. There's Google Jamboard, where you can put like digital post-its on the board and collaborate with the rest of your team on different ideas. Just simulates a brainstorming session in person. We also have a similar application called Mural. There is project management. So you can see some of the screenshots over there. This can be through things like Trello, if you've heard of it, Notion or Asana, but really basically a way to coordinate the team over multiple tasks, over different dimensions of a complex project. And there's also scheduling tools that you can use, such as Calendly and Doodle, where you don't go back and forth in an email, 4 emails to say, hey, are you free on Tuesday, 1 p.m.? Okay, you're not. Are you free on Friday, Friday, 1 p.m. and so on? You just simply give them the link you give them a customized link. It's connected to your Google Calendar, and they can just pick whatever free time is available, right? So this saves you a lot of time. So if you're, again, your team has some thoughts about flexible working or synchronous and asynchronous collaboration, then perhaps this is the kind of digital transformation tools and operations that you want to take up. And lastly, of course, is marketing and communications and accounting, payroll, and finances. So now you don't have to know how to use Photoshop or be a designer to be able to create a nice poster. You have something like a website called Canva, where they have a lot of presets, a lot of templates to be able to do this. And you also have MailChimp, which lets you very easily design newsletters to send to, let's say, your board members or your followers or your community. So if the concern is newsletters or posters and promotional materials, then maybe this is the transformation you want to be looking into, right? And of course, accounting, payroll, and finances, that's very specific to that task. I'm not going to cover it because I'm not an expert in any of those, but very general, simple things is perhaps using e-wallets for, when people want to make a donation. So in the Philippines, it can be enabling through GCash, online banking, having a QR code for people to easily scan and to send in donations to, right? So this is a way also of doing donations in a different kind of manner. Now, those are all the things, tools and operations that I want you to think of. Some might not be relevant to you. Some might be very relevant to you. And again, those in the blue boxes are just, if the team is thinking about this, if they're commenting on things like this, like flexible working, about communications, then maybe this is something that you want to look into. And think of it again as tools transformation, operational transformation, and impact transformation. Now I'm going to tell you a story about our digital transformation amidst the pandemic. So we did a volunteer program called Reaction, where it's basically about creating offline impact through online action, completely online action. Now let me start at the beginning, which was the start of lockdown here in the Philippines. If I'm not mistaken, that should be around March 9, and it surprised everybody. And in the Philippines, everything was shut down. Everything was devastated, right? No public transportation, no buses, no jeeps, no taxis, no Grab or Uber or whatever. Um, the different businesses had to close down. People couldn't go outside, and so what we were seeing, at the start, and it surprised, I think, most people. What we were seeing is that now that citizens, people were stuck in their homes, and the situation was getting very dire, even immediately. Um, People had the willingness, they had the resources and the time, stuck at home to be able to help their vulnerable communities, but they just couldn't go outside to do it. And we have our frontliners who were incredibly stretched, not taken by surprise, not adequately equipped to address all the people in needs, all the community in need with all of these health situations. So they were overburdened and lacking resources. But again, it was hard to help them because people had to social distance. And of course, we had our vulnerable communities, our essential workers, our frontliners who are upholding the basic social infrastructure, and their their basic health and safety needed to be taken care of, right? So we were in this situation because of social distancing requirements. We had people who wanted to help, people who needed help, but who couldn't collaborate together, and we had people who needed the impact from that collaboration, and again they couldn't be impacted because of this situation of social distancing requirements, right? So we looked at this, and we said, okay, we need to be able to do something to change the situation. It can't stay like this, because people are quickly losing their savings, they're quickly losing the resources they have to maintain themselves. And I want to pause here and I want to say, I did show you all of the tools and operations beforehand, um, before talking about this. But the very important thing is that you don't approach digital transformation from a technological standpoint. You don't look at the tool first, or you don't look at the operation and say, that looks really cool, let's take it up. You start by looking at your why. You started looking at the context. What are your stakeholders telling you? What's your community telling you? What are your collaborators or your ecosystem telling you? What's your board telling you, and so on. You always start with the why, and this is how it started with us. This is our experience with digital transformation. We didn't say that, oh look, that's a really effective tool. Everyone who's using it had like a 20% increase in productivity. It was really starting with the why, and the feedback from our stakeholders and the kind of impact that we wanted to create, but weren't able to without going through digital transformation. So what we did was, again, to create, what we did was create a volunteer program that was a response to the COVID-19 crisis in the Philippines. And we wanted to quickly and efficiently support people who needed it the most. And we had to do it in a way where people could volunteer and help out completely from the safety of their homes with just a device, whether it's a laptop or a phone, and their internet connection. And so probably you've already seen this before, but the start of lockdown in March 2020 in the Philippines, it was not common at all, right? So what did we do to be able to make that? So we knew the requirement, but we didn't know how to make it happen. So we had to go through a process to try to create this volunteering platform for everyone. So what we did is that we went to our stakeholders, different NGOs that are supporting the communities in need, whether it's in getting access to clean and potable water, housing, education, homeschooling, whether it's in environment or waste or basic health and so on. So we partnered with dozens of local organizations, and we said, hey, is there any way that people can support you and your team, doing online tasks? Like they're not going to be here in person, or maybe you can do something remotely, but it still supports you and is impactful for you. And all of them said yes. So what we did is that, okay, let's those operations and break them down into very small tasks that people can do in chunks from the safety of their home and in their own time, and which don't need very specialized skills to be able to do. So we did this coordination with the social enterprises and NGOs who are supporting their own communities across the Philippines. And then we structured that into a list of small activities that any person could do. Again, no special skills. That we're not, I'll talk about this. I'll give you more examples later. They're not comprehensive, but when, for example, an entire task of making a social media post, right? If one person can help with the graphic, if one person can help with the text, if one person can help with the posting, and one person can help with the coordination and checking it with the NGO to make a communication post. All of these people are doing seemingly unrelated tasks, very small tasks which sound very easy to do. But when they come together, they create this one action that creates a collective action. Yeah, this one collective action that creates a notable impact for this organization, right? And when you have hundreds of people doing these things which take very little commitment to be able to do, we suddenly start supporting all these NGOs, social enterprises, and communities that are having an impact on the ground. And so we heard the needs of our stakeholders. We structured it in a way where people could get involved. And then we had to think about the tools. The tools came afterwards, right? So how do we coordinate with people? How do we get them engaged? How do we keep them up to date with what's happening on the ground and connected to their impact, even if they're making a small task? So we use different tools for like sign up forms. We were starting to use Zoom, WhatsApp Messenger for quick access, Facebook groups to coordinate different batches of people, and we used Notion, which acted as a database of information for all of the activities that we were doing, because we were doing a lot of activities, right? So Make Sense is not, I didn't, when I introduced Make Sense, I didn't mention that Make Sense is an expert in different teams. We're an expert in collaboration, in innovation, in this sustainable and inclusive action. But see, for example, on the topic of housing, we're not the experts over there. So we had to collaborate with different organizations, and that's one thing about digital transformation. Also, it lets you work. You don't have to do things alone, right? It lets you work with so many other organizations who can help increase your impact. And this happened to us, right? By working with different organizations, tackling employability, water, housing, food security, frontliner support, education, mental health, and environment, we suddenly increased our impact by creating this kind of platform, by creating these kinds of resources. And so that's we should go back to what I was talking about before, impact transformation. We put the tools, we changed the way we operate, and we had this immediate huge change in potential of what impact we could create, right? So I'll talk about more specific examples of what people were doing on the ground on these teams later. But I want you to think about this core of operations, this core of the tools, operations, helping us to create bigger impact with our organization. Now, one other thing, aside from working on these teams, we're not a large team. To be transparent with you, we're less than 15 people. And we were able to, don't pay attention to these numbers, but we were able to mobilize thousands of people on these actions, work with so many different teams, because we took another approach to expand our impact. We said, when we started running it, we were not able to reach too many people because of the limitations of, coordinating with like tens, dozens of people. But then we saw people coming back week after week who were really passionate about volunteering, about helping out these communities. And they were telling us like, okay, I've done, these basic, simple things. I want to do more. So we realized that, hey, we can expand our impact even more if we're able to train people who are really eager to the same volunteering methodologies that us, the full-time employees, have. And so with this, we were able to exponentially increase the impact that we were able to create, because we were enabling the enablers, right? We would train community organizers to the same techniques, tools, and methodologies that we had, and they, as volunteers, would mobilize and coordinate their own volunteers. So for every like one person, it makes sense, instead of just coordinating 20 people, you could coordinate 5 people and each of these 5 people could coordinate their own 20 people. And we created this, cascade, this ripple effect of scalability in our impact. And again, it was thanks to digital transformation of our tools, our operations, we were able to increase our impact, not only in the teams and community, but also, I was talking about super mobilizers before I disconnected. But basically, it makes sense. We call these people who are mobilizing their own volunteers thanks to our training as super mobilizers. Yeah, you can see like at the start of the lockdown when there were a lot of college students who couldn't go to class anymore, who had suddenly an ample amount of free time. This was mostly them. So choosing to learn volunteer mobilization, community organization techniques, and organizing their own volunteers. Let's take this here. Okay, so we call them super mobilizers, and they instantly helped us to expand our impact. And from March, the start of lockdown, all the way to December 2020, we were able to organize around 1,500 volunteers, train more than 40 people to our different techniques, and impact more than 25,000 Filipinos in lockdown. So you can see over here, there's some volunteers, mobilizers giving testimonies. We were able to provide kits for students, young students learning at home, provide food for medical frontliners, to provide potent water for communities that are having trouble with access. One of the amazing things is that when public transportation was cut out, there were a lot of people who needed to go for dialysis or chemotherapy who couldn't go anymore, or PWDs, and other volunteers would offer up their vehicles to drive these people to the medical facilities. So just really having the platform to coordinate and let these people collaborate was very impactful, and we were able to create all of this from March to December of last year. This is still a running program, but I haven't collected the updated statistics yet for this year, so I'm just showing you what we did last year at the start and the peak of the pandemic and lockdown in Philippines. So with this, we received quite a bit of national and international attention. We were on CNN. We talked on Net25. The Obama Foundation gave us a shout out to the work that we were doing, because our founder is an Obama scholar as well. So we did get a lot of success with this program. We continue to, and really, this is just us connecting with dozens of people who want to be able, or have their full-time jobs, have a little bit, few hours in their day, and really want to create that impact, without having a job in the development sector. Because again, we started with our why, right? That's the Make Sense core dream, is where everyone can be part of creating social and environmental impact. And this is just another way, through digital transformation, of us being able to carry out our mission. So to be more concrete, what did it look like for a volunteer to be part of this Reaction Volunteer Program? So they would start with a kickoff call, which would orient them to the thing that they were going to do, the social enterprise or NGO that they were going to help. And then they would pick what they want to do. Do they want to work on education? Do they want to work on mental health? And so on. And in their own time, from the safety of their home, they would do the simple task. And then we would have a checkpoint, like a video call at the end of the week, to see, hey, how's everyone feeling about the mission? Do you have any trouble with your task? And also to meet like-minded people, because that was the one thing in lockdown, right? Still continues to be isolation. People feel helpless at home, powerless. But when they are creating an impact on the ground, when they are volunteering, using what little time they have to create this impact, they feel empowered. They don't feel alone. They connect with people who do also believe in the same thing. So we did this daily checkpoint. And then at the end of the task, whether it's a week or 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we would celebrate the collective impact that we were all able to do by chaining all these simple tasks. Yes, really celebrate it and move forward with a clear vision of the kind of impact that we created. Now we did one of the last activities that we did was in March 2021. Sorry, this is 2021. It says 2020, but it's 2021. So a couple of months ago. Of course, that's Women's Month. So we did the entire month activities that were on women empowerment and gender equality, and we had a total of 27 tasks. So you can see that these things that people were had the choice of being able to do, right? Volunteer to write a blog piece on young girls in coding, be an assistant teacher for an NGO called Girl Forward that supports young women, or a different organization that supports young women in going into STEM or becoming more active in sports. We supported different NGOs in creating online exhibitions and forums on violence against women. Volunteers could help for a workshop, arrange a workshop, or could help interview women in STEM to encourage girls in high school to go into coding or STEM fields and so on. So we had so many tasks that people could pick and do in their own time, again, from the safety of their home, that were not too intensive, but we're really creating a real concrete impact when chained in collaboration with other volunteers. So we call this the library of tasks. And the reason we were able to coordinate all these crazy number of collaborators that we had, volunteers, different 27 different types of tasks and activities, is because of the tools that we were using. So right now you're seeing Notion that acted as our this tool Notion acted as our one-stop shop for any FAQ, any of the resources, any information on the people, the organizations, or the actions that they were doing, and also the results that we were having, right? Were people showing up every week? Were they able to complete the task? Did they need help? So we were able to do this through, again, this tool called Notion. You don't have to use Notion, but just any, the point here is that we wouldn't be able to do this without the digital tools that we started using. And other things that we were using were online forms, using Typeform to get registrants to apply and get a first orientation, a quick orientation to the volunteer program. We worked on MailChimp and Google Mail to send weekly announcements and updates to them. Of course, using Zoom to coordinate with everyone, Facebook groups and Messenger to have quick interaction as well. And then what I said before, Notion as our one-stop shop or our hub of information on timelines, deadlines, assignments, personal and organizational information. And while we talk about Reaction as our volunteer program, the way we were able to use it, the way that we went through this rapid transformation in that one volunteer program carried over to our other impact programs. Right now, we have one program called Imagining Healthy Futures, where we support young medical graduates and doctors into supporting underprivileged communities with their health and working in primary health care. And we use the same tools, right, to manage the things that we're supporting them with. What you're seeing now is Google Sheets. We also have another project called NOIP 2025, or No Other Year for Plastic Initiatives, where we're looking to support sari-sari stores in eliminating single-use sachets from their operations and collaborating with different environmental organizations, communities, FMCGs, very complex project. And again, we're using the same tools that we were able to launch at the start of lockdown. And it really, again, enabled us to expand our impact. And because people from other parts of the world can use the same ways of working, the same tools if you equip them with it, and just the fact that Make Sense was a global organization, Reaction is a global movement. It's still ongoing in different parts of the world, from France to Mexico to Belgium to Lebanon and more. So the challenges in their environments are very different, right? For example, in France, there was a where people don't usually people don't usually stay with their families. What happened is that a lot of elders were starting to get, no one was checking up on them. No one knew if they were if they had slipped perhaps on the ground, or no one was, and they felt lonely and no one was connecting with them. So it became part of their reaction tasks. And it was not so much the case here in the Philippines, because of course there's a lot of families living together. But see how the same tools, the same processes brought to a different context creates a whole other kind of impact depending on the context. Because we learned what we were sharing. We shared what we were learning and the different ways that we were doing this. Now, another way that we were able to expand our impact is because, okay, so we took this action on education, we took this action on housing, and then suddenly we were able to create a micro community, to create public discussion on the challenges that systemic changes that we needed to make happen moving forward in terms of all of these advocacies, whether it's in mental health, in housing, in a circular economy, and zero waste. Because there were more people suddenly taking these actions, more community was really being built. We could create these spaces of discussion where people could really talk about the systemic change we could all make together. And we even were able to use the same platform to mount disaster responses in a limited capacity, of course. So for example, last year, at the end of last year, when we were hit by Typhoon Zulus, this was the biggest tropical storm in the world in the entire year. A lot of people were stuck on the roofs of their houses and were not able to call for help because the emergency and crisis hotlines were just completely jammed, overrun with calls. And they had no idea, they had no way to connect to their loved ones or connect to an emergency call. either through the internet or their own credit and their phones, right? So on that day itself, with the collaboration of our community of volunteers, we were able to create just a very simple tool online spreadsheet where people could forward the phone number of a person in need, and donors or volunteers could donate as little as 20 pesos. So this is like 50 cents, 50 US cents, half a dollar, maybe 20 cents, like 20 pesos to 50 pesos, something as small as that, to someone in need who's stuck on the roof of their house, who cannot connect to the crisis hotline. Um, Give them a little bit of phone credit to be able to connect to the internet, tell their loved ones that they're doing okay, or make a call to their loved one. And we were able to quickly we were just instantly be able to set this up with the ideas and the collaboration of our volunteers and communities, and we were able to raise quite a bit of quite a bit of support, just in the first day and the second day itself of the typhoon hitting. So we were able to again create spaces. We were able to create more impact in different countries. We were able to respond to disasters in this online way. We were even able to support the private sector. So we collaborated with with City Group here in the Philippines. They came to us and they said, look, every year we have this thing called Global Community Day, where all of City Group volunteers. But now we can't do it. We have no idea how we're going to do it because we always used to do it in person. Can you help us? Because we see you're doing this reaction thing. And we said, sure. And we asked them, what do you want to work on? And they said, we're very concerned about the unemployment crisis in the Philippines, right? Because we reached the highest point. I think it was, the next slide, 42%, right? Highest in history at the peak of lockdown. So what we did is that we went to different NGOs and social enterprises that were working on employability for at-risk communities, whether these were PWDs, reformed convicts, single mothers, fresh graduates, and so on. And we were able to connect the HR department of City to support these at-risk communities through these NGOs and social enterprises to things like helping them with mock interviews, doing resume reviews, CV reviews, and cover letter reviews, doing career talks, career discussions one-on-one with them, and to really support them. And we created this platform where the HR department of City could volunteer, help these kind of communities that were very aligned to their goals. The CEO of City actually even got into the hype and volunteered, and we got amazing feedback from employees of City who were going beyond what they were being asked from them. We even had cases where they said, okay, I gave my volunteer hours that I signed up for, but I want to do more because I really feel connected to this person that I talked to, this youth that I did this mock interview or a career discussion with, and I want to support them outside. And that amazing, it just blew our mind. And so we were able to get 70 plus HR experts from City to be involved in this. Originally, we did it for a couple of weeks, and then with just City in the Philippines. But then word spread to the other APAC offices of City, and we were able to offer it to also them, to those in Singapore, Australia, I think in Hong Kong, and so on. We were able to support 113 beneficiaries and 18 volunteers who were coming from outside of the Philippines, from different APAC regions. And so again, because we took up this digital transformation, we were able to expand our impact to different countries. Excuse me. Respond to disasters, help private sector companies come up with more to continue their impact mission as well in this very this struggle in limited time. And again, all things to us looking at that digital transformation and taking the steps and experimenting with all of this. So now I'm running out of time, so I'm just gonna take some final words on taking action. So number one, like I mentioned before, I don't suggest you start with tools or operations or anything. Start with your why. Start with your mission and the kind of impact that you want to create. And you can do that by listening to the needs of your team and your stakeholders, right? Because at the end of the day, they're just tools. They're digital solutions. They're always in service of the organizational goals and the problem solving that you want to do, whether it's for social impact or environmental impact. The second thing is definitely get buy-in from your team. We all know that change is difficult, right? We're all trying to create change in the different stakeholders that we work with. And it's no different internally with your team. Some things that you want to do to ease the transition is definitely get feedback from your team on how worth it is for them, what changes they think can be made. You want to celebrate small wins with operational improvements, like, oh, we saved 1 hour on our payroll, and that's this week, and it's awesome. It's like this month, it's awesome. You highlight the teammates who are committing to the transition, if they're picking up quickly, if they're really dedicated to it, if they find perhaps a new feature, a new thing to speed up. Really highlight what they're doing as they're adopting to this new way of working with these new tools, and communicate clearly that no one's in danger of being docked off their project or role because they don't go through the digital transformation. And of course, lastly, take a progressive and long-term approach. There's a lot of testing. It's a marathon and not a sprint, right? Always constantly keep an eye out for any kind of transformations or any feedback from the team on bottlenecks, burdens on the workload, and so on that you can take up. Talk to your stakeholders and community and on what they recommend. Maybe there's a tool or a way of working that you may not have heard of before. And identify low, medium, and high levels of investment you can make into transformation to slowly ramp up your team and see if it works for you, right? Maybe it just involves using a different kind of function in the same tool that you're using. Maybe it means choosing completely different tool, or maybe it means completely overhauling kind of the way you work slowly by slowly. So always identify the low, medium, and high levels. Don't go for like complete overhaul immediately, because we know that change is hard. And you want to ease your team, be with them as you're making this transformation. So that's it. That's all I want to talk to you about digital transformation, our experience, and also my point of view. My name is, again, Carlos Hechanova. I'm the executive director of Make Sense. And if you want to reach me, if you find this interesting, you want to talk with me, my email is very simple to remember, carlos@makesense.org. Sorry for going 3 minutes over time, but I'm now handing it back to you and stopping my screen share, Anne-Marie.